Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hi, my name is Vivian Acquah, and I call myself the Inclusive Workplace Wellness Advocate. I know it has been a while since I've been live, but then again, when you save that sweetness and that good, impactful, inspiring conversation, I will bring something. And this time, I have a few guests joining, but I also wanted to share my screen because today's topic will be about, and let me share my screen. Today's topic will be about the great resignation. I assume that left and right, you must have found so many information about people leaving, people having enough time to leave, and we are going to delve in with the guest speakers of today. We are going to delve into this topic because know what, the great resignation is here to stay, and we are going to have a conversation about what employees can do, what employers can do to prevent this from happening, or recognizing the signs, right? So there is this great research that Microsoft did, the global research, international research, and the result was that 41% of your team members are thinking about leaving within 6 months. So think again, let that ponder, let that marinate. If 41% of your team will leave today, what would you do? Instead of making it only the Vivian Show, let me bring my guest speakers for today up, and I'm going to properly introduce them. So first up is Cece. Well, I call her Cecilia. That's her name, but she wants Cece. Cece is the founder, or Cecilia is the founder and managing partner of the Entrepreneur, CFO, and she's a professional global advisor. She has a professional global advisory firm, and also know that she is the author of Dear Accountant. And next up is Denise Cooper. I really had a good conversation with Denise Cooper, who has her own podcast. Definitely listen to that as well. And she's the founder and CEO of Remarkable Leadership Lessons. She's also a published author and acclaimed speaker as well. And I think I see Mark joining in right now. So let me bring up his bio as well. Mark is the author of the Career Toolkit, an essential skills for success that no one taught you, and he's also an MIT instructor. Welcome, everybody. So, the first question that I want to ask you, Cece, is why do we need to humanize the workplace?
Wow. I think why haven't we been
Mm,
humanized the workplace is kind of like my intuitive response to this question, right? I think, I think, yeah, why haven't we? It's so important to I'm so glad that we talk about this now more often because finally we are. It's so sad to say finally we're seen as human to be treated like human, right?
yeah.
To address our needs and not be treated just like like okay, you pay me in exchange my time and my work, right? But really, I think it's a mutual relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Like company invest in you, allow you to bring your best self to work, bring your whole self to work, which in turn, help the company grow. I think to me, it's just a win-win situation. I don't know why we haven't been doing that.
You tell me. Handing the mic over to Denise. Why do we need to humanize the workplace? What's your take on that?
Well, CC asked the right question. Why haven't we
Mm-hmm.
thought of this before? And all great ideas are like the VA moment, right? You're sitting there
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly it blows your mind and whatnot. But I think the big issue is that for most part, HR hasn't really changed for about 100 years. It's designed to be a function that really protects leaders from bad managers, or, the corporation, excuse me, from bad managers. And so the structure is really a process oriented thing. So we hire people, we try to keep them in there. The books get wherever the books are. And, in the mid 80s, 90s, we started using people as assets and capital. And so we started balancing the book. And I'll tell you, having been in HR for 25 years, that I admit to, it's really hard for managers, anybody to fire anybody.
Mm.
And so to be able to even step into that, you've got to have a level of disconnect with your employees, with that
Mm-hmm.
person.
Yeah.
And, we do the bell curve every year. And that means 50% of employees, managers are underperforming.
Mm.
We don't want to have that hard conversation of, well, if 50% are underperforming, what potential are we not accessing? So I
Mm.
think it has a lot. The reason we haven't thought about it up until now is it's really a hard conversation to be able to talk to people like people and to figure out this idea of fairness versus equity, or fairness and
Mm-hmm.
equity. And just the way we load up people in the workplace with, did you deliver results? Did you deliver results? Did you
Yeah.
deliver results?
Yeah.
Looking at the outputs, but not necessarily the inputs that get us to the outputs.
I love that. I love what you shared. Looking at the output, not looking at the input. People, we need some
Mhm.
ingredients to motivate the people in the workplace. So definitely love that. Thank you, Denise. And Mark, what's your take on why do we need to humanize the workplace?
We suffer from the street lamp effect.
Mm.
People measure what's easy to measure, and that
Mm-hmm.
includes number of units sold, that includes return on capital, revenue, and that's what we focused on. That's what Wall Street focuses on.
Mm.
Human capital is not as easy to measure. It's harder to assess capabilities of any individual, let alone an organization. So we have ignored that type of assessment. We haven't made it that important. And Wall Street doesn't reward that, because Wall Street rewards quarterly returns. Typically, human capital investment, that is a long-term investment that will yield dividends months to years down the road. So there is little capability and little incentive to focus on that. As Denise said, we can focus on the output. How many things did we sell? We can focus a little on the input when we can measure it. I can invest $1 billion in a plant knowing that this will increase my efficiency 10% and therefore I'll produce more units. It's harder to say, if I put X dollars into people, this is how it's going to help my productivity 18 months down the road. And so we've ignored it because it's a hard problem.
I like that also, but it comes to mind that humans are not a plus plus one situation where you put two and two things together and you get the outcome would be two or maybe three, right? And especially when it comes to engagement, you need to put an effort in as an employer, as a manager, engage to receive a similar effect, right? That's at least my take on that. So I'm curious because in the beginning I talked about the Great Resignation and I highlighted, where it came from. But um, what is the valuable lesson? And I'll start with you, Denise. What is the valuable lesson that you learned from all this talk about the Great Resignation, which I see as the war for talent before the lockdown, but it's much worse now?
Well, I think the lesson is pretty easy. Shutting down the entire world.
Mm.
There were some companies that survived. There were
Yeah.
some companies that thrived, and there's some companies that just don't exist anymore.
Mm.
And if you look at many of the companies that thrived or survived, they were able to take their people, take their ideas, and pivot.
Mm.
They understood. And I hear Mark saying it's a difficult problem to measure. I think it's a difficult problem to measure because we haven't asked the questions.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked in companies, I've worked in roles where we actually could measure the input of what people do and what that does to the bottom line. It takes rethinking how we look at what outputs actually look like and what that means. And I think to some extent, it means that we have to change the way we speak with, teach, and look for from leaders in terms of what is it that we're actually looking for. And part of that conversation has to be growing the capacity of the organization to adapt, change, and respond to market conditions in general. And so if we're not asking those kinds of questions, if we're not asking about what's the capacity of people to change as our development of an organization, as our culture, to help them figure out how to change, then I think Wall Street needs to ask different questions. And I will even say that many people on Wall Street, many fund managers on Wall Street are not asking those tough questions. and causing, the people they fund and manage, their portfolio managers, to start asking those kinds of questions. And I think that's been the thing that we're going to see coming out of this. That is going to be a big question in terms of, markets do not like surprises. They react really bad to the unpredictable.
I love that. I love
And
what
I
you're
think one of the
sharing.
things
Yeah.
that these folks on Wall Street, that the shareholders, et cetera, are starting to look for are, how can we ensure that as the world shifts, as change continues, how are you ensuring your organization from a growing your capacity to adapt, change, and react? I think that's going to be the new question.
Love that. Mark, what's your take on that? On the lessons that you have learned from the Great Resignation?
Well, I think there's a larger lesson we are just starting to wake up to as a society, which is thinking about careers.
Mm,
We have done this poorly for the past 100+ years. We say to our students, oh, are you interested in the body? Maybe you should be a doctor. Are you interested in drawing? Consider a career in graphic design. We just say, here is some particular piece of knowledge, and here is a job that uses that knowledge. And that's how we teach people to think about their careers. What we are starting to see, and what better people have done, but it's rare in schools, is people to ask, what do I want? Not just mechanically, do I want to work in medicine or graphic design, but what do I want in life? What work-life balance do we want? And people have bantered around that question a little bit, but it was never asked in seriousness. You never had a lot of options for doing that. And so people are asking, what is the work-life balance? How much time do I want to work from home? How much time do I want on the road? How much does money matter versus other attributes versus support and a culture in my company? And so we as a society, and when I say we, I mean most probably Western nations, are waking up and saying, what is it that I am trying to achieve with my career? And so I think the labor force and hopefully upcoming generations will really take to these questions that won't just be momentary, but it will be a shift in how we think about our careers and really society at large.
Mhm.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And Cece.
Yeah, my lessons are very similar to Mark and Denise as well. I think one of the very obvious one is to be able to see the real strength and resilience of a company. So usually people is like, oh yeah, what's the value of investing in our people? Well, because they get through tough time with you. You see
Mm,
how, so this is kind of the results of it. You see like some company just like crumble and failed. So that's like that's one of it. And I think, yeah, the other thing is kind of like Mark talked about. Besides survival, which is like for the most part what we've been doing, like now we have the options. Like we have time to think about what we really wanted to do, like what is the purpose and mission of our life, that kind of thing. I think it's exactly what we've been talking about, kind of wake us up to really reevaluate our life. What do we want to do besides work and just survive? Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
I like that. I like that. And also, it got me thinking while you were talking, all of you were talking, it got me thinking regarding diversity, right? Because there's a lot of talk when it comes to diversity, but then
Mhm.
and inclusion as well. But then again, this Great Resignation is also telling a story about how inclusion works or how it isn't working for a company. And I noticed that, there's a lot of talk, a lot of commitments being shared online, and companies or leaders or managers not walking that talk, still not realizing how important inclusion is. It's, you can hire different people, but if you don't have a culture or have a system in place where people can feel like they belong, can feel part of the company, or feel like their voice matter, or their ideas matter, then what's the point in hiring all these people if they are going to leave within 5 months or even 6 months, right? So thank you for sharing. And I'll start with you, Mark, because you have a book. You have your book, The Career Toolkit. And regarding those who are pondering about, shall I stay? Shall I go now? It's that song. that song from the 90s. I'm not going to sing it. I'm not a singer, but if you want to look it up, look up Shall I Stay or Shall I Go Now? It's a song from the 90s. And this lockdown, this pandemic gave a lot of people to rethink their career, rethink the choices that they have made. What advice or tips would you share to those who are thinking about changing positions in the company or outside of the company, or maybe even changing companies?
Too many people are just focusing on leaving where they are today. They
Mm,
are moving from, not moving to. I
mm,
don't like my current situation. I'm out of here. You always want to be going to a destination, not from a destination in life. And so it's important to think ahead, say, where do I want to go? Both in your next job. I want a job that maybe it pays more money, or maybe I have a more supportive manager, or maybe it has better work-life balance or gives me certain challenges, but also think ahead. I grew up as a competitive chess player, so I was always trained, think multiple moves ahead.
mm.
Don't just focus on this next job. Think about where you want to be in 5 or 10 years and how this next job is going to take you towards that ultimate goal. So think a few moves ahead and have a clear goal in mind. Don't just think about, I don't like where I am.
Mm. That's a good one. And I wish I had that advice 20 years ago when I started a career and left with that reason, saying that I don't want to work here. And then what I noticed when I look back through my career, I noticed that I wasn't closing, the past, but I was bringing it, that hurt, that pain, I was bringing it with me, where I noticed that there were some occasions where there were similar situations that if I had dealt with the fact that I want to go forward to something positive, something new, something better, it would have been helpful. So setting that attention, but also the affirmation within yourself, setting that as a goal. I want a better career, more money, a better work life integration. There's so much more out there. So thank you, Mark, for sharing that. And Cece,
Mm-hmm.
as an author of Dear Accountant, what would you say about this topic?
Yeah, so I work with a lot of young people, and trust me, like I've heard like a dozen times people want to switch jobs, and I'm like, where are you going? Going to a different firm, same industry. Like, so my advice usually is, first of all, ask yourself why. Why do you want to leave? And also the other question is, can you get what you want where you're at? Right? Sometimes it might just take to talk to someone that you trust and get a different perspective. Because as we all know, like we always think the grass is greener on the other side, but it
Mm-hmm.
may not necessarily, right? And changing jobs is a lot of effort. While
Yeah.
you change to a different job, like it takes time to adapt to a new environment, that kind of stuff. It's a lot of it. So I want to make sure that they've thought it through and make sure it's worth it.
I love that. Thank you. And it seems like today I'm only having authors on the panels because Denise is also an author of the remarkable leadership lessons, also valuable to learn. And what is your take on this, right? Even though your book is about leadership, but I want to touch on this topic from a self-leadership perspective. What can the people do?
Well, I think first of all, we have to think about ourselves as human beings first.
Mm,
And all of us are leaders.
mm-hmm,
Some of us have a title or a role that
mm,
defines that we manage resources and time of other individuals, but all of us are leaders. So
yeah.
let's kind of bring it there. The other thing is, I think both Mark and Cecilia are just brilliant in, where are you going to? Stop running from something. What is it
Mm,
that you want? But also, it doesn't mean that you have to leave the place that you're at now. In terms of you might be able to find what you're looking for. I think the other thing that everyone needs to understand is 2 points from me. One is um, there's no roadmap anymore. Up
mm,
is not always the right way.
true.
To be more valuable and to have more flexibility, more influence inside of your organization, which really is what gives us that soul happiness kind of thing going on. It's really about, do I feel like I'm being impactful?
Mm,
The way to be impactful is to be able to be influential and to have your ideas adopt it or to work with people who see your ideas as very valuable. So to that end, we need to understand that companies are fluid, jobs are fluid, and sometimes taking a lateral to get the kind of experience in various parts of a business is a good idea. So up is not always the right way to go. The other thing I would say is that we live in we've talked about it for a very long time, that we're in a global society, we're interconnected, et cetera, et cetera. But what that really means in terms of what I need to do every day is to understand how to create connections with people who have no reason to have a connection with me, whether it's in my current workplace or outside of it. No matter what, the numbers are still there. I love Indeed. I love all the other places. But the reality is 80% of jobs are found through people through your network. If you have a narrow network that only looks like you, only doing the same things in businesses that are competitive, your options for career change, career growth are limited. The way you want to expand it is you want to expand that network, which is the reason why inclusion on a human point of view, my point of view, small L, point of view is very important, because that diversity of people, companies, industries, crafts, etc., is how you make a career that is rich, because your career is long. It's about legacy. It's about impact to other individuals.
I love that. What is the question that they can ask themselves? And I'll go around. What is the question that you would like the individual to ask themselves? Are you waiting me to name names?
Yeah. No. Who's on first?
I'll start with Denise and I'll come back around.
Both the questions that, Cece and Mark talked about, what is it that I'm looking for? To understand that we really have to plan our careers in like 2-year, maybe 3-year increments. And particularly because, 50% of the workforce is now women. We really need to understand that the importance of where we at in our personal life and how does that integrate into our work life is important. The other side for men, this is something brand new for them, to start really thinking about not just being the person who brings a paycheck home, but to be able to have a home and to participate in the home with a meaningful place. And that's new skill development for them. And so I think the question that you want to ask first is, what is it that I want my life to look like right now? What is it I need to look for? And to know that my career is long. It's going to be 40, 50 years. It will change. You may be in finance or tech today. I talked to a woman who, in 2015, she was in finance and tech side on that. Now she's in blockchain and fintech. And because it's evolving, it's changing. And we have to understand that opportunities will present themselves, but you've got to know your stuff and you've got to know where you want to go.
Thank you. Mark?
There are a number of questions I recommend people ask, and I've got about 20 of them listed on the resources page of my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. Certainly the most important is, where do you want to be in the future? But of course, in that is not just, I want this particular job, I want to be the VP of X, but is things like, where do you want to live? How much time do you want to spend at home? A lot of the questions for our career are based around our life and our lifestyle. And we have to remember, we can't plan our career in isolation. We can't just say, this is what I want job-wise. We have to say, this is what I want in my life, and then what type of career supports the overall life that I want.
I love the fact that you are mentioning, how much time do I want to spend at home? Because now we have the luxury to work from home. But I know from my friends in the US that commuting 2 hours is, for some people, it's normal. And I'm like, okay, you're losing 4 hours in your day. And then on top of that, work 9 to 10 hours. Where do you rest? Where do you socialize? How do you spend time with your family? So that's a valuable ask to ponder on, to think about before you look for a new job. Thank you. And Cece?
Yeah, I think it's similar to what Denise and Mark talked about already. Like, I think the question is like, what's important to you, right? And it's different as you continue to move along your journey, right? For a single person who just started out, fresh grad, is very different from maybe 5 years down the road when you have kids, maybe, later, So I think at different stage, you have to ask yourself, like, what's important to you? And also, I think, to take a step further is, what exactly what you wanted to do? Do you have the skill? And also evaluate your skills. Is it transferable, right? Because maybe, like you were client facing when you're a single person, but when you actually eventually become a mother, or parent, you wanted to stay home more. So what can you do with the skills that you already established, right? There's a lot of things that we don't think through, but there's a lot of transferable skills and experience that you already have built, which can continue to serve you as you move along.
I love that. There are a lot of skills that we don't realize, but also we have to remind ourselves that 15 years ago or 20 years ago, when I started out in finance, this wasn't possible. The fact that communicating with you and the fact that I was able to set up a summit, that wasn't possible. I had to go to the office to do the books. I had to go to the office to speak to a client. I had to go to the office. I had my mobile phone, but at the time that was that big thing, the old Nokia version where you were happy that you had something weighing almost a kilo, but nowadays it's different. But we are in a society where, tech is changing, is creating a lot of possibilities, but also realizing that keep on learning, keep on developing, find ways to, even though you're thinking about staying, what courses can you do? What training can you do now to create that valuable knowledge, create that valuable, or make yourself make yourself more valuable for your future manager or for the future company that you're going to work for, and keep on training your L&D mindset, because never not learning, never not learning. So thank you. Now I want to go to the managers, right? So Cici, I will start with you. Are there 2 tips or 2 practices that you can share with the managers so that they can prevent their people from leaving? If a person is thinking about, I'm okay here, but there's something that my manager is not doing, and it forces me to maybe think outside of the box, maybe think to move from a department. What tip would you share with the managers?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people talked about, and we've all heard it, right? People don't quit the company, they quit their manager. So they play such an important role. And I feel like, we hear about it all the time nowadays, like communication is super important. But yeah, we all know that, right? But the reason why people don't communicate, cannot share, like, or be open about what's really in their mind, because there's no trust, like we talk about like having trust and be in a safe place. Like, if we really think about these 2 words, so important. Yeah, so I think it's important to establish that. Otherwise, yeah, forget about communication. I might be sitting there with someone, but I'm not telling you the truth, so you get nothing from me. So I think, yeah. So I think that's my thought.
Psychological safety, it's everything. It's everything. So thank you for highlighting that. Thank you. And Denise?
Well, I'm going to take a little different of tact. I think employees basically want to know that they can win, they can achieve their goals. And at work, they want to feel like they contribute. And I think as I work in corporations with leaders on a regular basis, I think this ability for managers to move obstacles out of the way so employees can do good work is something that we need to really focus our time on, particularly in leadership development. And oftentimes, particularly, so some of my clients are in retail. You've probably seen the post. The guests who are listening in on it have seen the post where they walk in and somebody's screaming at them, because they didn't have the right product there. The lights are not working. I had one manager who went from just coaching their employees to be good salesperson and customer service people to they had to figure out how to get money in there. They had to fix the lighting. They had to bring cookies and water because the restroom was down the road. They had to have masks on. They had to get
Wow.
sanitizers in. And so the job turned into not just, one thing, which is what they started with. And then the big thing was the trucks would come at the wrong time. So they were in there unloading a truck. So imagine a 5'1" woman trying to unload a truck of product for 1 week because they scheduled it wrong. She couldn't get other people in there. And so these barriers to operation and being able to move barriers of operation so that people can win is a very important thing. And I think for many companies and many executives, they tell people what to do, but they don't really understand what are the barriers that keep people from being able to be successful in their job. And loyalty comes from when I know you got my back. Yeah. Trust comes. I will go over the moon if I know that you have my back and that you can do something. Good intention is what we judge people on. I believe all people are of good intention. However, sometimes their behavior not so consistent. No. And so I think this idea of what managers and leaders can do is they can really start tackling some of these things that get in the way of people feeling like they can win.
Yeah. I love what you're sharing. And in media, I wonder when people, guest speakers are talking, but I love to do that. But immediately reminds me of Undercover Boss.
Yeah.
Right? Then they see when they become undercover, then people feel like they can share and they can open up, but they can also see all the barriers that are laying there, which they never heard from when they were sitting in their ivory tower. So I would say if there would be a possibility to be an undercover or support those or work with the people that are working from the ground, why not go there and have a conversation with them about how can you uplift the culture? What can you do to support them, especially now in these challenging times? The pandemic has been is a very serious challenge for everyone. Why not ask the people, what can you do to support them to make their work better so that they can work better as well? So thank you, Denise, for highlighting that. Mark?
The question to ask is, why are people working for you or your company? Because if it's just for the paycheck, there is another company out there offering a bigger paycheck. People have different types of motivations. Money is certainly part of it. And for some, money is the primary driver. But there are other motivations people have for being there. Understanding the motivations of individual employees and how you can align your needs, the company's needs, to those motivations will help create better engagement. And it's not just, well, I'll stay here until I find a bigger paycheck. The second thing you can do is you can upskill and engage all your employees. Yeah. And here again, I'm going to mention another free resource. And by the way, the resources I'm mentioning, I have nothing to sell. These I give away for free. I'm not a consultant. I'm not trying to sell anything here. But on the resources page of the Career Toolkit book website, there is a free download for how you can create a peer learning program at your organization, at the team level, department level, company level, where you can engage all of your employees, upskill all of them while creating better internal relationships and a better experience for them at little or no cost to you. And now the equation changes from you're working here for a paycheck to we care about you. We want to help upskill you, help you on your path, and employees will want to stay with those companies longer.
I love that. Is the peer that you're mentioning, is that similar to mentoring?
It's different than mentoring. The technique for this, it's akin to how we teach these skills at MIT and how top business schools teach it. You bring together a number of people from different backgrounds. I recommend groups of about 6 to 8 people, but there are ways to scale it up. And then you take some topic and you can use content from a book, like one from some of our authors here. You can use an article, a video. You can use a podcast. It doesn't matter where you get the content from. Everyone engages with that content. And then you have a discussion about it to get the different perspectives, to talk about how people have implemented this, to go beyond just, well, the book said ABC, but let's talk about the reality of implementing that. And that's where you get a deeper understanding and the development of these skills.
Great tip. And I would say use this conversation as a starter for the peer conversation so that you can have a further conversation about what it means if 40%, 41% of your team would leave. That is a huge impact. If you have a team of 10 people and 4 people would leave, but still the work remains for 10, still your clients is meant for that whole team. How are you going to solve that? And on top of dealing with the stress, on top of finding new people, on top of so many other challenges. So I am curious about CC. What would you do if 4 people, if your team was 10 people and 4 people were leaving tomorrow?
Wow, what would I do?
Mm.
Well, that's all right. Well, intuitive. Let me tell you what I have in my mind. Usually, what I've seen is people leave in groups. Like if 4 is leaving, I can almost see the other 4 or the rest of the group is out the door like anytime soon, right? Oh my God, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I of course I'm gonna try to save this 4 because it's gonna make a huge difference. And I think, and then I think it's almost too late if they're like leaving. Oh my God, these things doesn't like just you wake up one day and decide to leave. Like people have been thinking about it. These things, these feelings like have been accumulated. So I don't know what I'm gonna do.
It is challenging. It is challenging. And sometimes people need to leave. Sometimes they need to be set free so that there's room for growth for other people. But if 4 people are leaving at once, it signals something.
Well, yeah, I think I still wanted to know why, have a conversation. My point here is like, I don't think, it's almost like too late to rescue the relationship. You kind of have to let them go.
Yeah. Sorry, Denise, what would you do?
I think the first thing I do is I got to look at the work and say what work isn't going to get done, because I'm not going to kill the others that are there. And then I think the second thing is what CC was hinting at, is that you got to look at the other 6 and you got to sit down and have a conversation of what's getting in the way and how they're going to go. Because she's right. People tend, if you got 4 leaving, they generally won't leave on one day, but you got the signal at 2, you should have been doing something. Okay. Out of this thing. And I think you have to have a conversation with them. But I think you got to, if 4 people walked out of my door now, I've got to really look at how I'm going to help the other 6 feel like they're winning and they're not drowning, while I try and figure out how to bring in temporary resources or figure out, how to handle those customers in a different way or set expectations for my customers, et cetera. For me, it's always, having been in HR, it's always working with that manager to figure out how do we think about the work differently, set new expectations, we figure out what's not getting done, and how do we pivot in the moment.
That's a valuable thing that you and CC also share, because majority of the time we focus on the gap, right? We don't focus on what the people that are still there, where the people are still there feel the stress or get that workload where they have to now compensate for the work that their former colleagues have been doing, right? So that's a very valuable thing, because you don't know what you got till it's gone. And once they are gone, I'm listening to too many songs here. But once they are gone, what are you doing about the rest? How are you supporting them, and how are you, helping them develop? Because if not, they will also get the idea, think about, maybe I need to leave as well. Mark.
I used to do counterterrorism work. And in that field, we teach that by the time the actor has put on the bomb and head towards a target, you're probably too late. The best time to stop them was long ago. To CC's point, by the time they're saying, I'm leaving, that's it. They've probably accepted a new job. They've mentally gone there. You needed to stop it beforehand.
Yeah.
And there's a story I tell everyone I hire. When I join a company, I share the story and I tell it to folks I hire. So my father was a doctor. And on his first job, when he was looking to leave, he said to his manager, I'm starting to look for something new. I want to let you know so you can begin to hire my replacement. He wanted to make it easier for his manager, for the other doctors, to even worry about patient welfare so they're not understaffed. And his manager replied, well, you can start looking today. You're fired.
Yeah.
Right. And now my father was helping out his boss, and this is how his boss responded. As a manager, it only helps me if you tell me this. And so I tell the story. I say, look, you can always talk to me. And if you're getting frustrated, if you're thinking of leaving, let's talk. Let's have that discussion. And I'm going to see, can I steer you away from it? Can I change whatever is wrong to keep you? That's your chance to stop the exit. Now, there still might be some inevitability. I had one person who said, listen, my wife just got into law school. We're going to move cross country in 6 months. And this is before remote work was quite as feasible. There was no stopping him, but that's fine. Even in that case, great. That gives me a heads up and I can plan. But to do this, you have to have that trust that Cece and Denise were mentioning earlier. You have to build that trust that they know, I'm not going to say you're fired. I'm not going to say, oh, you know what? I was going to send you to this conference, but not anymore. I have to still treat them the same, and they have to trust that I am going to do that. But when you have that, you get the earlier signals and you can stop the problem before it becomes a full-blown problem.
That's a very interesting take, because in my mind, when you were sharing that, I was thinking like, okay, that person is fired within one day, because the moment that somebody, not all workplaces are that safe, or relationships are that safe with their leaders where people can feel like they can share. So I hope that, in the near future, tomorrow, that we will come to a place where we were able to share, like, it's not you, but I need to leave, or it is you, I need to leave, or come to a place where I found something better. I'm leaving within a few months. It will give you enough space, and don't build that ill situation in the meantime, because that can happen as well, where in the beginning, the relationship is good, but then something happens where they are just like, I don't care anymore because I'm leaving anyway, right? That's also something that you want to prevent from happening. So thank you, Mark, for sharing. And we are almost at the end. I do have a wish. I know that 2022 is knocking on our doors, but then again, 2025, 3 years from now, I have a wish, and I hope to hear your wish. And I'll start with you, Mark. What are your wish for 2025 when it comes to humanizing the workplace and this whole topic about the Great Resignation? What do you hope to see?
That we start to recognize the relationship between employees and employers is not just about a paycheck. It is about development. It's about culture. It's about work-life balance. It's a lot of these components. And we can have honest conversations saying, okay, yes, I want this salary perhaps, but here are the things I also want. And companies recognize they have to provide it. They even tout it. And they recognize that my development might be part of what I am getting. And this is part of the HR benefits offered to employees. And so we're changing the discussion from it's just about money to it is about our overall happiness, engagement, and success.
I like that. And I also want to add something to what you just shared right now. Also look into the phases that people are, right? Like CC shared in the beginning, people might start within your company as single, or maybe they are joining your company as parents, or maybe they are caregivers. Look into the different phases that they have so that you can support them in that area as well. So thank you. Denise.
I think, the best thing that we can do is if we hit 2025 and we see a real push towards being able to problem solve. And instead of looking at what the metrics say, we really start looking at what are the inputs necessary? What do people have to do? What skills are people looking at? And I think, to a big extent, I would love to be able to see where the HR process does not make the manager the be all end all. So managers go to school to learn how to run operations and to be good at managing people, but they really aren't career development people. They can.
So what are you saying? You want to? No. I'm real about this. So what are you saying? Do you want an extra person from HR, or somebody who sits, how do you say, next to the manager and look at the careers? What are you
I think
aiming for?
employees, everyone, CEO down,
Mm-hmm.
needs to understand that you are the person who has to be the primary driver of what success at work looks like and what it means from a career perspective. And I think that you have to, if we're talking about what a company can do, HR can spend some time aggregating what's already in the market. They don't need to build anything. Aggregate what's in the market. Go to Mark's website. Here's free tools that he's giving away that says, here's how you can do it. But this idea that the company is going to take care of me, the company is going to manage my career, my boss is the person who's going to tell me what I'm good at and love to do, and he's going to provide, he or she is going to provide the right. I mean, we have to kill that idea. Because we are evolving individuals. We're going to have needs that we don't even know we're going to need because the world is changing. We're going to want to work in places that we don't know that we're going to work in today. And we're going to be community oriented as well as work oriented. And I think the ownership about our career and what inclusion looks like and what equity looks like, we individually have to get better at answering the questions of what do I want to be? How do I want to live? And where do I want to do my best work? So
I love that. And also know that managers are human, or at least I assume leaders are also human. They cannot read your brain. They cannot read your minds. So if you're seeing something that you don't like, ask them, is there a budget to upskill? Is there a budget to train? Or what do I need to do to become XYZ? Ask them and then see what happens. If they are not, saying anything or not doing anything regarding to that, I would say listen to this episode and then take, your necessary steps to upskill.
But isn't that kind of the crux, not to cut you off, but the crux of this whole thing around inclusion, that the manager is doling out to other individuals, but they're not including me?
Yeah.
You have not because you ask not.
Yeah.
And I know it's tough to ask, but if you don't know and you don't ask, you don't get.
On that note, Cece.
Yeah, I hope in 2025 we don't talk about this anymore. Like, no, this would just be intuitively, people just get it, been doing it. Because I think right now, so I hope that people get the importance of, investing in relationships, specifically, the importance of employee engagement. Because let's be honest, right? Okay, and you don't expect someone to stay with you for 10 years.
No,
right?
Those days are over.
But you do want them to give you 100%, maybe 1,000% while they're there, right? And when they leave, you want them to maintain this good relationship, good feeling, because they do. I've seen so many times people leave, but then they bring you clients in the future. And then keep in mind also, someone who does grow up. Some of them, they leave as a young person, but maybe later on they became an executive. These relationships does pay off in the long term. So 2025, let's not talk about it.
I love what you shared. And also, when people leave, have a good heart-to-heart conversation with them. Invite them for coffee or tea and talk with them. Why did you leave? What can I do to improve? What can I do to make it better for the next generation? And also invest in your alumni, because you never know if they come back. You never know if they become a client, or you never know if they become your best referral, right? So let's sit on that thought. Thank you so much, Cece, Mark, and Denise, for this conversation. I hope that the audience that are watching or watching the replay or listening to this episode are really thinking about what they can do regarding the Great Resignation, and also reflect on yourself. What action can you do instead of pointing your fingers to the manager or the organization? So thank you. And until next time, this was Let's Humanize the Workplace. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.